They said the clouds fled the sky because of her. They said the rain turned to ash before it could touch her skin. They said the ancestors had turned their backs on the world the moment she took her first breath. But what they didn't see was this. The girl they called a curse would be the only one brave enough to walk into the fire of the Sun-Eater's heart. And the clay pot she brought back would save them all. In a village where the earth was once red and the rivers sang through the valleys, there lived a girl named Thandiwe. But no one called her that. They called her the Cracked One, the daughter of the eclipse, the demon child. Thandiwe was born with skin that looked like the desert itself. Deep fissures ran across her arms and face like drought-stricken ground. Her very presence seemed to mirror the thirst of the land. The day Thandiwe entered the world, the sky committed a sin the elders would never forgive. It began at midday, when the heat was a heavy, golden blanket over the village of Oakhaven. The clouds were bruised with the promise of a seasonal downpour, and the midwives had already placed wide clay basins beneath the eaves to catch the life-giving water. But as Thandiwe's mother, Shuni, let out her first cry of labor, the sun began to vanish. A shadow, cold and unnatural, bit into the edge of the sun until it was nothing but a hollow ring of fire, a black eye staring down at the gasping earth. In the sudden, eerie twilight, the birds fell silent. The wind, which had been a cooling breeze, stopped entirely, leaving the air stagnant and thick with the smell of scorched stone. Inside the birth hut, the flickering oil lamps cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to reach for the newborn. When the final push came, Shuni's heart gave its last beat, her spirit departing just as the child's first breath entered the room. But there was no cry from the infant. Thandiwe emerged into the darkness in absolute silence. The head midwife, a woman whose face was a map of 1,000 rains, recoiled as she held the child to the lamplight. She did not see the soft, smooth skin of a newborn. Instead, Thandiwe's flesh was interlaced with fine, silver-gray fissures, looking like a riverbed that had not seen water in a century. And when the child finally opened her eyes, the women gasped and fell back against the walls. They were not eyes of amber or obsidian, but twin orbs of brilliant, glowing white-blue light, pupilless and terrifyingly divine. At that exact moment, the heavy clouds above the village vanished. They did not break into rain. They simply dissolved into a dry, mocking haze. The basins remained empty. "The sun has been eaten," the midwife whispered, her voice trembling with a primal fear. "And she is the one who swallowed it." By the time the sun returned to the sky, the news had spread like a wildfire through the drought-stricken brush. The villagers did not see a grieving daughter or a miracle of survival. They saw a thief who had stolen the rain and traded her mother's soul for demons' eyes. As Zola, her father, wept over the cooling body of his wife, the village elders stood at a distance, their shadows long and accusatory. They did not bring gifts of honey or cloth. They brought the heavy weight of a name that would define her life before she could even walk. "Thandiwe," her father whispered, naming her for the love he felt. "Demon child," the village roared back, naming her for the fear they held. That day, the green grass began to turn to straw, and the long, bitter thirst of the land began. For 10 years, Zola fought the rising tide of the village's hatred, but even the strongest levee breaks when the earth is dry. By Thandiwe's 10th summer, the village streams were nothing but paths of sun-bleached bone. The baobab trees stood like skeletal hands reaching for a sky that offered no mercy. The elders no longer whispered, they shouted. Every dead goat and every withered yam was laid at the feet of the girl with the glowing eyes. The end came on a night when the heat was so intense it felt like a physical weight. The high elder, a man whose heart had shriveled alongside his crops, led a procession of torches to Zola's small hut. They did not come for blood, but for a cleansing. "The land has rejected her," the elder proclaimed, his voice cracking like the soil. "As long as the demon child walks our dust, the sky will remain a vault of brass." She must go to the scorched cliffs. Let the sun take back what it created. Zola held his daughter one last time, his tears leaving dark, fleeting tracks on her cracked cheeks. He pressed a small, smooth stone into her hand, a piece of the riverbed from the day they first met. The world is brittle, Thandiwe, he choked out. But water always finds a way through the cracks. Remember who you are. She was led to the edge of the village, past the mocking stares of children who threw stones and women who spat at her shadow. They left her at the base of the scorched cliffs, a vertical wasteland of red rock where the heat shimmered in oily waves. She stood alone as the village torches retreated, a small, fractured figure against the vast, indifferent dark. The first year was a lesson in the language of stone. Thandiwe learned that the desert was not empty. It was merely quiet. She found water in the deep crevices of the rocks where the morning dew hid from the sun. She learned to eat the bitter roots of the scrub brush and the fruit of the cactus that bloomed only by moonlight. As the years passed, her body transformed. The silver-gray fissures on her skin deepened and branched, mirroring the canyons and the ravines of the cliffs she called home. Her skin became a living map of the drought, tough as leather and resistant to the fire of the midday sun. Her glowing white-blue eyes grew sharper, seeing the hidden life in the dust, the path of the scorpion, the breath of the sleeping lizard. She became a ghost of the heights, a silent sentinel who watched the village from above. She did not hate them. Instead, as she touched the parched earth, she felt its agony as her own. Her skin cracked further because the land was breaking, and in her solitude, she realized the truth. She wasn't just a child of the eclipse. She was the land's own daughter, waiting for the moment the sky would finally weep. The thirst of the land eventually moved from a hardship to a hollow, echoing silence. In the center of the village, the great well, the ancient heart that had sustained Oakhaven since the time of the first ancestors, became a tomb of dust. On the morning the bucket returned filled with nothing but dry, gray sand, the village finally broke. Men wept openly into their hands, and the children were too weak to even chase the flies from their faces. The silence was heavier than any scream. In a desperate bid to force the hand of the heavens, the High Elder gathered the last of the village's strength. He stood over the dry well, his robes tattered, surrounded by the smoke of bitter herbs and the blood of the last white bull. He chanted until his throat was raw, dancing in frantic circles under a sun that seemed to grow larger and more predatory with every passing hour. He called upon the rainmakers of old. He begged the spirits of the wind. He threatened the clouds. But the sky remained a cruel, unblinking blue. The ritual fire did not bring rain. It only added more heat to the suffocating afternoon. As the sun began to dip, casting long, skeletal shadows across the square, a village madman who had been sitting in the dust for 3 days stood up. His voice, thin and reedy, cut through the elders' fading chants. "You knock on a door that has been locked from the inside," he wheezed. "The ancestors have not forgotten us. They are waiting for us to admit our crime." The High Elder turned, his face a mask of exhausted rage. "What crime? We have kept the laws. We have offered the sacrifices. We threw away the key," the madman replied, pointing a trembling finger toward the scorched cliffs. He reached into his tunic and pulled out an ancient, crumbling scroll of gazelle hide. The prophecy of the outcast, a text the elders had buried generations ago to maintain their grip on the people. It is written, "When the heart of the village turns to stone and the great well returns to the earth, the rain shall follow the one who wears the earth upon her skin. Only the child of the eclipse, born in shadow and bathed in fire, can walk where the warriors stumble. Look for the eyes of the sky, for in them lies the river." A cold shiver ran through the crowd despite the blistering heat. They looked up at the red rocks of the cliffs, where the demon child had been sent to die. The High Elder looked down at the sand in his well and then at the scroll. For the first time in his life his pride faltered. The warriors they had relied on were too weak to stand, and the gods were silent. They realized with a sickening clarity that the salvation of the many now rested in the hands of the one they had treated as nothing. Driven by the terror of the prophecy, the High Elder dispatched 3 of Oakhaven's finest warriors to find the fabled Water of Life. They were men of iron and muscle, draped in leopard skins and armed with spears that had tasted the blood of lions. The village watched with bated breath as they marched toward the horizon, their water skins full and their spirits high. But the desert is not a place of muscle. It is a place of spirit. One by one, the desert broke them. The first returned 3 days later, his mind unspooled by the heat, babbling about a sun that spoke in tongues. The other 2 never returned at all, their footprints erased by the shifting sands, leaving only their bleached bones to mark the path of vanity. High above, perched on a ledge of the scorched cliffs, Thandiwe watched the failures of men. Her glowing white-blue eyes saw the shimmering heat waves as if they were currents in a river, and she felt the thirst of the land pulsing beneath her feet like a dying heartbeat. She looked down at her own hands, where the deep fissures in her skin had begun to weep a clear, resin-like sap. She was no longer just a girl. She was a living extension of the parched soil. She did not feel the stirrings of a hero, nor did she seek the forgiveness of the people who had spat upon her name. But as she pressed her ear to the red rock, she heard a sound that no one else could. The earth was crying. It was a low, tectonic moan, a plea for the cycle to be restored. Thandiwe realized that if the rain did not return, the very stones would crumble into nothingness, and the memory of her father and the mother she never knew would be erased by the sand. "I do not go for the elders," she whispered to the wind, her voice raspy from years of silence. "I do not go for the well. I go because the earth has asked me." She stood up, her blue cloth fluttering like a lonely flag against the crimson sky. She took nothing but the smooth river stone her father had given her and the ancient clay pot she had found in a hidden cave, a vessel etched with patterns that mirrored the cracks on her own face. As the sun began to dip behind the horizon, turning the desert into a sea of liquid fire, the demon child stepped down from her sanctuary. While the village below huddled in the darkness of their own fear, Thandiwe turned her back on the last signs of civilization and walked straight into the furnace of the heart of the sun. The desert was no longer a place of heat. It had become a place of whispers. As Thandiwe pushed deeper into the shifting dunes of the Sun-Eater's domain, the horizon began to warp and shimmer like a disturbed pond. The air grew cold, a bitter, unnatural frost that bit into the fissures of her skin. Suddenly, the sand before her swirled into a shape she had only seen in her dreams. A woman stood there, her features soft and her arms open, draped in the fine indigo cloth of a queen. "Thandiwe?" the vision breathed, its voice like the rustle of silk. "My daughter, why do you suffer for those who hated you? Why do you bleed for a village that saw you as a monster? Come with me. We can walk into the cool darkness where the sun can never find us." Thandiwe's heart stuttered. It was the face from her father's stories, her mother, Shani. For a moment, the girl's resolute mask crumbled. Her hand reached out toward the ghost, longing for a touch she had been denied since her first breath. But as she stepped forward, the image shifted. Her mother's face twisted into a mask of disgust, and the beautiful indigo cloth turned to ash. The dunes around her erupted with the phantom voices of the village. The High Elder's mocking laugh echoed from the wind. The children's taunts pelted her like invisible stones. "Demon child!" they screamed. "Ugly thing! Why save a world that threw you away? Let them burn as you burned. Let them thirst as you thirst." The sand rose up, forming the jagged, pointing fingers of the villagers. They circled her, a whirlwind of malice that whipped her hair and stung her glowing eyes. The pain in her soul was far greater than the heat of the day. The spirit of the desert was probing her spirit, looking for the rot of resentment, the seed of a vengeful fire that would turn her into a true demon. Thandiwe dropped to her knees, clutching her father's river stone until her knuckles turned white. The voices grew deafening, urging her to curse the land, to let the drought finish what the elders had started. But she looked down at the stone, the only thing that had ever been smoothed by water, and she remembered the earth's low moan. "They were afraid," she whispered, her voice barely a tremor against the howling wind. "Fear makes people small, but the land is great. I am not the daughter of their hate. I am the daughter of the thirsting world." As the word thirst left her lips, she forced her heart to soften. She visualized the village children, not as the ones who threw stones, but as the fragile lives that needed a drop of mercy to survive. The illusions shattered like glass. The mother, the elders, and the mocking ghosts dissolved into fine dust. The silence returned, deeper and more profound, and as Thandiwe stood, the white-blue light in her eyes blazed with a new, steady purity. She had passed the trial of the heart. The silence of the desert was suddenly broken by a sound like a great fire consuming a forest. Before Thandiwe, the air itself began to tear, revealing a towering figure composed of molten light and swirling solar winds. It was the Sun Eater, a spirit whose eyes were twin supernovae. Its presence was so intense that the sand beneath Thandiwe's feet turned to glass, yet she did not flinch. Her cracked skin, born of the eclipse, absorbed the heat like a parched riverbed. "Child of the shadow," the spirit's voice vibrated through her bones. "Many have come with spears and pride, but you come with a hollow pot and a heavy heart. To win the rain, you must prove your mind is as sharp as the sun's rays. Answer my 3 riddles, or stay here as a pillar of salt." Thandiwe bowed her head, her white-blue eyes glowing steadily. "I am ready." The spirit leaned closer, its breath smelling of ozone. "First, I am the twin of the light, yet I am born of the dark. The brighter the fire burns, the larger I grow, yet I have no substance of my own. What am I?" Thandiwe looked at her own feet, where a long, dark shape stretched across the glass sand. "A shadow," she whispered. "The greater the light, the more space the shadow demands. It is the price the sun pays for its glory." The spirit pulsed with a golden hue. "Correct. Now hear the second. I have no throat, yet I can scream. I have no hands, yet I can tear down mountains. I wander the world but have no home. What am I?" Thandiwe closed her eyes, listening to the low whistle against the cliffs behind her. "The wind," she replied. "It is the breath of the earth, restless and invisible, yet it carries the power to reshape the world." The spirit's light dimmed slightly, shifting from a predatory orange to a soft, contemplative gold. "You are wise for one so young, but here is the final riddle, the one that broke the warriors of old. In a land where nothing survives, where the rivers have died and the seeds have turned to stone, what is the only thing that can still grow and bring life back to the dust?" Thandiwe thought of the elders who had cast her out. She thought of the children who had mocked her, and the father who had loved her despite it all. She felt the deep fissures in her skin, the marks of her suffering, and realized they were not scars of a curse, but vessels for empathy. "Mercy," Thandiwe said, her voice ringing clear. "In the desert of the soul, when every other spring has dried, mercy is the only seed that can grow. It requires no rain to bloom, yet it is the only thing that can call the clouds back to the sky." The Sun Eater fell silent. The searing heat began to pull back, and for the first time in 10 years, the spirit of the sun smiled. The golden light of the Sun Eater shifted once more, turning a deep, royal crimson that bathed the glass desert in the color of blood. The spirit reached out a hand made of solar flares, hovering just inches from Thandiwe's fractured cheek. "You have the mind of a sage," the spirit whispered, its voice now a seductive crackle, like a hearth fire on a cold night. "But why use that wisdom to serve those who broke you? Look at your skin, Thandiwe. It is a desert of its own, a record of every stone thrown and every cruel word spoken. With a wave of its hand, a shimmering veil appeared in the air, a mirror of liquid light. In it, Thandiwe saw a version of herself she had never dared to imagine. Her skin was no longer cracked or gray. It was smooth as polished obsidian, glowing with an inner radiance. She stood tall, draped in silk and gold, with flames dancing at her fingertips. "I can make you the goddess of Ash," the spirit promised. "I can give you the power to turn Oakhaven into a memory. You could fly on the back of the wind, watching from the clouds as the elders who exiled you crawl in the dust, begging for a drop of the mercy you so highly prize. Why be a demon child when you could be a vengeful queen?" Thandiwe stared at the reflection. For the first time, she felt the seductive heat of rage. She remembered the cold hands of the midwife, the tattered robes of her father, and the lonely nights on the cliffs where her only friends were the scorpions. The power to make them feel her pain was within reach. She could be beautiful. She could be whole. She could be feared instead of loathed. But as she looked into the glowing eyes of the goddess in the mirror, she noticed something missing. The eyes were bright, but they were empty. There was no room in those fiery orbs for the memory of her father's smooth river stone or the low, aching moan of the thirsty earth. To become a goddess of fire, she would have to burn away the very parts of her that felt the land's suffering. "The fire you offer is bright," Thandiwe said, her voice steady as she turned away from the liquid light. "But it provides no shade. If I become a goddess of ash, I am no better than the drought that is killing my people. My skin is cracked because the earth is cracked. If I am to heal the land, I must remain part of it." She looked the spirit in its blinding face, her white-blue eyes shining with a resolve that outshone the solar winds. "I do not want to be a queen of ruins. I would rather be a broken girl who brings a cup of water than a perfect goddess who brings a sea of flame." The spirit of the sun let out a sound that wasn't a roar, but a sigh of relief. The red light faded, replaced by a soft, silver glow that felt like the first light of dawn. The temptation was over. The sun-eater bowed its radiant head, its voice no longer a roar, but a melody of cooling embers. "Many have sought the water to quench their own thirst," the spirit whispered, "but you seek it to quench the thirst of the world. Because you refuse to burn, you shall be the one to pour." The spirit reached into the center of its own blazing chest and pulled out a small, pulsating spark of pure white light. It placed the spark into the ancient clay pot Thandiwe had carried from the cliffs. Instantly, the empty vessel grew heavy. A sound like a rushing mountain stream echoed from within its walls, and a fountain of crystal clear, glowing water burst from the opening. It did not spill onto the glass sand. Instead, it arched upward, defying gravity, dancing in the air like a living thing. From the damp earth that miraculously formed at the base of the pot, a single pink flower sprouted, delicate, fragrant, and vibrant. It was a miracle of life born in the heart of death. "Go now, daughter of the eclipse," the spirit commanded. "The land is waiting." As Thandiwe turned to begin the long trek home, the sun did not beat down upon her with its usual malice. Instead, it positioned itself directly behind her head, its rays softening into a brilliant, golden halo that traveled with her. Every step she took was no longer an agony of dragging limbs and scorched breath. The water in the pot hummed a song of restoration, and its mist kept her skin, though still cracked and gray, cool and supple. The journey that had taken the warriors weeks to fail took Thandiwe only days to complete. She walked with a purpose that made the dunes flatten before her and the dry winds retreat. She was no longer a pariah fleeing into the wastes. She was a bridge between the heavens and the earth. As she neared the borders of Oakhaven, the horizon began to change. The air grew heavy with the scent of wet stone and approaching storm. In her right hand, she clutched the pink flower, a promise of the spring to come. In her left, she cradled the overflowing vessel. She could see the village in the distance, a cluster of tattered huts huddled in the dust, unaware that the shadow they had once feared was returning to them as a light they could no longer deny. The shadowy figures of the starving villagers moved like ghosts in the haze, their eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for a sign. They did not see a demon. They saw the sun itself walking toward them on two legs, carrying the life they had thrown away. When Thandiwe crested the final hill, the village of Oakhaven looked like a graveyard of clay. The people lay in the shadows of their huts, their tongues swollen and their spirits extinguished. Even the High Elder had fallen, clutching his useless staff in the sand. But as the golden halo of the sun announced her arrival, a collective gasp rose from the dust. They saw a figure with skin like the earth and eyes like the stars, carrying a vessel that sang with the sound of 1,000 rivers. Thandiwe did not stop at the gate. She walked to the center of the village, to the mouth of the great well that had turned to sand. With a movement as graceful as a falling leaf, she tilted the clay pot. The glowing water did not merely trickle. It surged forth in a sparkling torrent, diving into the depths of the well. A deep, thunderous boom echoed from the bowels of the earth, the sound of a heart starting to beat again. Seconds later, the well hissed as a geyser of pure, sweet water erupted, drenching the dry ground and turning the dust into rich, dark loam. The sky, which had been a vault of brass for a decade, finally shuddered. Heavy, charcoal clouds rushed in from the horizon, and the first fat drops of rain began to pelt the village. As the downpour intensified, washing away the salt and the sorrow, a second miracle occurred. The silver-gray fissures on Thandiwe's skin began to soften and close. The cracked earth of her flesh smoothed into flawless, dark ebony, as if the rain were mending a broken vase. Her white-blue eyes settled into a deep, peaceful indigo, though they never lost their supernatural spark. As the villagers found their strength, drinking from the sky and dancing in the mud, a dark energy shifted. They turned toward the High Elder and the men who had cast Thandiwe out. Anger, as hot as the drought, flared in their eyes. "They left you to die," a man screamed, reaching for a stone. "They brought this curse upon us with their fear. Let them thirst as we did." The mob surged forward, but Thandiwe stepped between the people and their prey. She held up the single pink flower, its petals vibrant and unbruised by the storm. "Stop!" Her voice rang out, no longer raspy, but as clear as the falling rain. "If you kill them in the name of the drought, the desert will never truly leave your hearts. The earth did not give me this water for blood. It gave it for life." She looked at the High Elder, who trembled at her feet in shame. She reached out and helped him stand, her smooth hand a stark contrast to his withered grip. "I was a demon because you were afraid," she said softly. "I am a savior because I chose to forgive. Let the rain wash away the hate as well as the dust." The stones dropped. The cycle of vengeance, older than the drought itself, finally broke. Under the canopy of the great storm, the people of Oakhaven learned that while water saves the body, only mercy can save the soul. Thandiwe, the child of the eclipse, stood in the center of the bloom, a girl no longer thrown away, but a queen whose kingdom would never know a dry season again. What lesson did you take from Thandiwe's journey of mercy? Did her choice to forgive the ones who threw her away surprise you? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one. If this legend touched your heart, make sure to smash that like button and share this story with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And if you haven't already, subscribe for more stories that explore the magic, mystery, and wisdom of the human spirit. Don't forget to drop your location in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the globe. Until next time, remember, your worth is not in your body, it is in your heart.